Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Let's continue implementing the product feature and the presentation layer. First of all, we have to define the product state, the product event, the view model, and the related screens and the components. And the product feature, go back to the presentation layer and screen and create a new class. Let's call it product state. We use record. Now the first state, we can basically infer the states from the previous applications. We need the list of products. That's going to be represented by observable collection of type products preview. We need the state of last page is pages loading and current page for pagination. We need the product detail and the state for is searching and the suggested products. And for the page product detail page, we're going to define the available list that's going to be shown under the breadcrumb and the empty state for initialization. We're going to proceed with the same manner in other features. Now we have to define the events. Under screen, create a new class. Let's call it product event. Basically, we don't have the capability of Swift to represent the events using enum, nor the capability of representing events using sealed class as done in Kotlin. Therefore, I'm going to proceed with another way using record. First of all, it should be public. And instead of class, it has to be abstract record. This is the parent event. We can infer the needed events. For example, let's say we would like to define the first event. First of all, it has to be sealed record. This event is get product as a parameter page, and it has to inherit from the product event, and so on for the rest of the events. Load products and to search products and to clear the search query. And we have to deal with breadcrumb navigation. Therefore, I'm going to create two events related to this particular section. I'm going to call the first event reset breadcrumb navigation, and the second one to seed current breadcrumb navigation. And basically with the same manner, we're going to define the other events related to authentication and the wishlist feature. Now we can define and implement the view model. Under screen, creates a new class. Let's call it product view model. It's going to be public partial class products view model. As a dependency, we need the product use cases. It has to inherit from observable objects. We have one state, which is the product state. Let's initialize this using product state and empty. And we're going to need another state, which is for the search query. We're not going to include this state under product state in order to make it simple for us to handle the changes of the search query. It is an empty string. All right, let's start by defining the function on events. And again, we're going to proceed with the same manner, which is very good. I like this approach a lot because we're going to decouple the implementation of the view model and the related components or the related screen. For the first case, it's going to be of type get products. In this case, we're going to implement internally this particular command. We're going to call it get products command on get products, a nullable parameter of type integer for the page. And you have to do get products and execute. And you have to pass here the value from get products event and page. And you have to do break. For example, let's take a load product. Let's create this function. In case search products, create the function. And for clear search, let's create here the command. Let's call it clear search command or on clear search. And here we have to do on clear search command. Clear search command. Execute. And you have to pass here null as an argument. And for the other case, to reset the breadcrumb navigation, update the state, the navigation items, the same one from the initialization. And the last case, to set the current breadcrumb navigation, update the breadcrumb navigation array by adding, instead of products, the breadcrumb navigation current destination. Now let's implement all the needed commands and the methods. Let's start with this command, the search query to an empty string. Next, we have to update the state is searching false, and we have to empty the suggested products. Now let's implement, for example, on search products. First of all, we have to check if the current page is greater than the last page. In this particular case, we have to do an early return, and we have to call the use cases. We have to pass here the query and the page from the state. And we have to subscribe to the observable. Now it's going to be the same thing that we have done in other apps. Now for the first case, if it's of type page loading, we have to update the state to set is page loading to true and to empty the list of products, because we're not going to handle here scroll to load more, we're going to navigate to the next page. Therefore, we have to empty the products after loading the next page. Now, in success state, let's store the results under response data. Now, if the response is not null, and at the end, we have to do here break. Now, if it's not null, we're going to update the state, is page loading to false, and you have to add the response and data. And for the last page, it's very important to prevent the current page to overshoot the last page by doing response, data, and last page. It's very simple. Now for the error, we're going to set is page loading to false. And for the default state, we're going to do is page loading to false. As you can see here, it's very simple. I'm going to fold this section. It is implemented. Now let's implement the other function, which is on search suggestions. On search suggestions, going to be related to the changes of search query. We're not going to include it here under the events. It's going to be separated from the other events. Let's create this relay command. And again, don't get too religious about this. If you feel that this approach is going to overcomplicate your project, you have basically to omit adapting this approach. It has to be, first of all, a relay command, and you have to set a condition on which this particular command should be executed. I'm going to add here a computer property that's going to check if this command should be executed or not. Let's call it can search. We will perform search only and if only the search query is not null or white space. And we have to pass here the search query as an argument. And inside the parameter of the relay command, we can add can execute, and we have to pass here the name of the computer property that's going to decide whether this command should be executed or not. It's called can search. I like how they have done it under the MVVM community toolkit. It's very readable and it's very powerful. And for the relay command, I think, if I'm not mistaken, you have to add the on keyword as a leading keyword. If you have added here on search suggestions, it's going to generate for you the command as search suggestions command. Just keep that in mind. Now, this particular command is going to rely on the computer property can search. Therefore, we're going just to do here a debounce in order not to do in every single change of the query an API call by doing task and delay 500. 500 is more than enough. You can do here 700 if you will. Continue with underneath, we're going to add the task scheduler and from current synchronization context, which means that after 500 milliseconds, we're going to call this block of code. Now we can call the use cases and get suggested products. You have to pass here the query as an argument, and you have to subscribe to the observable. In case of loading, we're going to set is search into true. In case of success, set is search into false, and we have to add list of the suggestions to the suggested products. And because it's null, we're going to add a default or a fallback value empty array. And for the error, it's very simple. We're going to add is search into false, and for the default is search into false. Now this command is implemented. Let's fold the command. We're going to use the use case, the product ID, and you have to subscribe to the observable as usual. In case of loading, we're going to set is page is loading. And if you want to show the old cache while waiting for the new cache to appear or to be loaded, you can assign to the state products the new or the cache from loading state.data. In case of success, we're going to set is page loading to false, and we have to assign the products from the success state.data. And if you have an error, let's assign the is page loading to false, and we can call the callback function on error. And you have to pass here the error, and you have to do break. For the default state, we're going to assign is page loading false. All right, fold this section. Now to paginate the products, first of all, we have to check if the current page is greater than the last page, or the page is null from the arguments and is page loading, we're going to do here an early return. Next, we're going to call the use case, and we have to subscribe to the observable. In case of loading state, it's very simple. We're going to assign is page loading true and current page from the non-null value. And for the products, it's going to be initialized to an empty array. And you have to do break. In case of success, we're going to do the same thing that we have done under suggestions or search suggestions. We're going to set is page loading false, product to response.data, and last page response.last page. And if you have an error, we're going to set is page loading to false. And for the default state, it's going to be same is page loading false. Fold this command, I will add another private command here to change the page. Let's call it on next command. This is the generated command. In this particular command, all we have to do is change the state of the current page equal the state of the current page +1. Now we have to handle the changes of the search query. For the search suggestions command, it depends on the can search, and can search depends on basically the value of search query. Therefore, we have to observe the changes of the value of search query by doing partial void, and we have the list of the generated functions or methods that the auto generation code has done for us. We have to do here on search, or we have to choose the on search query changed that has only one parameter. We have to check if we can execute the command. We're going to execute the command and execute, and you have to pass here null as an argument. As simple as this. Whenever the value of search query changed, it's going to check if we are able to execute the command. This particular function is going to check that the search query value is not null or white space. Then it's going to run the command, which is basically this particular implementation that we have done here. It's going to wait 500 milliseconds and to subscribe to the observable. And that's pretty much it for the view model, product view model. And the screen creates a new user control product fragment. As usual, I would like to start from the code behind to define the needed state and to hoist the needed states. We need to hoist the state of product state. We need the authenticated user basically to allow us to toggle the products on and off from wishlist. And we have to define the toggle wishlist command as well as the pagination trigger command. Let's switch to the products fragment example file. I'm going to show basically the loading indicator as done in the Vuetify application. If you do remember, under the Vuetify application, we have done the skeleton loaders. Therefore, we have to create the loading indicator as done in the Vuetify application. Let's call it products loading indicator. I'm going to add dynamically 9 elements to be shown under the product or the loading indicator. Therefore, I'm going to create here a public static member, and let's call it product skeleton. And you have to use to generate 9 empty string elements using the enumerable and repeat just empty strings and 9 elements. And whenever this particular product's loading indicator is ready, we're going to feed that to the source of whatever we're going to do here. And let's come back to the example file. We're going to use here wrap panel. It is predefined under WPF. Let's name this panel or part panel. This wrap panel should be adaptive. We have to use the library that we have installed earlier, adaptive layout, true. Now for the orientation should be horizontal. For performance, let's do it recycling. Now let's come back to the code behind and let's assign and let's add dynamically the children of the wrap panel. It's very simple. We're going to loop over product skeleton. We can access the part panel and children and add dynamically the needed children. I'm going to create a card skeleton and the components. Instead of grid, we're going to use core UI and card. Let's add here a width and height and some margin. Inside, we're going to put here our skeleton loader. And here we have to do new card skeleton. And let's add the animation duration to 1. All right, for some reason I can't see here this component. Let's specify here the width and height and some margin. You can add here some border radius, 6 for example, and some padding 6. I think we're gonna leave it at this. Now let's come back to the products fragment. Let's use the component loading indicator. I think we have to add some extra spaces here. Let's remove the padding. I already know how it's gonna look like. We have just to maintain the same spacing between the loading indicator and the representation of the products card. Now we have to show this particular component if only if we are under loading state. Therefore, we're going to use a converter, Boolean to visibility converter. We have to check if this is a Boolean value, otherwise it should be visible. So basically it's going to return Boolean value. If it's true, it's going to be visible, otherwise it's going to be collapsed. Now let's use this converter. First of all, let's center it horizontally and vertically. And for the visibility from the stage is page loading, and we have to use the converter. And let's assign the automation ID from the constants file. Now for the rest of the screen, it's going to be represented using a grid. consists of the Looty animation, as well as the title and the list of products. We're going to define here the raw definition. For the content, it's going to be represented by a for loop, items control, centered horizontally, of course, and the item source from the state, product state. Is virtualization to true for performance and recycling? This content should be visible when the page is not loading. Therefore, we have to use the inverse Boolean to visibility converter. Here it should be collapsed and visible. We have to register it here, inverse to visibility converter. Now for the item panel, it's going to be a wrap panel. And let's define the components that's going to be represented for each individual component. We have to implement the product card. Therefore, under the component, create a new user control. Let's call it products card. Let's start with the code behind. We need basically the products preview. We need the state of whether this user is authenticated or not in order to show the menu or the toggle button. We need another state whether this product is in wishlist, and basically the command to toggle the item or the products on and off, and the parameter, command parameter. Now let's go back to the products card. This is one of the most complicated user controls in this particular tutorial. We have to handle lots of animations and a lot of events. We're going to use the core UI card. Let's specify here the width and some margin, and let's specify here the background color. And let's set the border radius to 6. And to get rid of this error, we have to add to the resource user control design theme that we have implemented earlier in core UI. And we have to merge resource dictionary, and let's import the needed design time resource file. You have just to build the entire project. Inside the card consists of an async image and the title and the price and the learn more button. Another grid to represent those elements under a vertical sequence using raw definition. For the async image, it's going to occupy the maximum height. And for the rest, let's say, for example, 3% for the title and 40% for the learn more button. Or you can just do the opposite, if you will, 40% for the title and the price, and for the rest, it's going to be 30%. Now let's add the async image. We're going to use basically the product's ID as its accessibility identifier. I'm going to wrap this within a grid. Let's set the border radius only for the top corner, left and right, and for the quality level 10 for performance. And for the automation ID, we have to use basically the static resource, more specifically the UI constant, products preview image ID. And it has a placeholder. The placeholder should be replaced by the ID. How to do so? It's a little bit complicated, to be honest. First of all, we have to do here the accessibility ID, and here we have to do binding. Now for the value, it's going to be the product and ID, dependency property. In this case, the relative source in centered type, it's the local product card. Now we have to use the string format to format basically the string, which is a static value. Let's import the accessibility identifiers. And here we have to do accessibility identifier, UI constants, product preview image ID, whatever we're going to put here under this particular static string. And it's going to look for the placeholder and replace it with this particular content. Now for the URL, it's product and thumbnail. For the loading indicator, we're going to place here just a progress indicator, nothing substantial. And for the error indicator, just an SVG file. Let's choose, for example, the information SVG file. Let's import the images. All right, you can see here it's red, centered in the container. Now on the top of this particular image, we have to put another section for the icon or whatever menu you want to do here. In this particular menu, we're going just to put the toggle button. I'm going to represent this using a stack panel. Let's give it a name, action button container, for example, and it should be visible once the user is authenticated. When the user is not authenticated, it should be hidden. Therefore, we have to use Boolean to visibility converter. Make it in between the resource dictionary, and inside we have to put our toggle button. We're going to do it later on. Let's mark it with a to-do, and that's going to wrap up our today's video. For the next tutorial, we're going to continue implementing this product card and the needed components. I hope you have learned something new. See you in the next one, and happy coding.